Hello and welcome back, adventurers. This is Captain TTRPG, and today we're talking about Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Hello, adventurers. Today we are going to pick up with part 2 of our best weapons discussion. We covered the best melee weapons which use strength for attack rolls in our first video, so now it's time to go to the other side of that coin and look at those that require dexterity or finesse weapons. Finesse weapons allow you to use dexterity instead of strength for your bonus to attack rolls. However, you don't get to add their bonus to damage rolls. You're still using your strength bonus for any damage with finesse weapons, with the exception of one subclass for rogue, but it's a small enough niche that I'm not going to worry about it here. Many of the finesse weapons also have the agile trait. We didn't run into this much with the other video, but if you haven't watched my melee weapon traits video, this is a trait that says, hey, we get to reduce our multiple attack penalty when we attack with our second, third, whatever attacks with an agile weapon. So instead of a -5 penalty on your second attack, if your second attack is with an agile weapon, it's a -4. And then -8 instead of -10. Agile does come up. It's not in all of these weapons, but you'll see it pop up here and there. The classes that get the most benefit from finesse weapons are those that can use dexterity as a primary ability score. Champions, exemplars, fighters, magus, rangers, rogues, swashbucklers, classes like that use melee weapons heavily, and they can use or must use dexterity as their primary ability score. Near marshals like inventors, thaumaturges, and investigators might also get a lot of value out of these finesse weapons if they want to lean into a way that increases their AC and gives them a way to fight with melee weapons. These are also good for caster classes that want to try to do some sort of melee, like a Gish character. Things like bards and clerics potentially get a lot out of this. So what are my criteria for a good weapon? Well, if you watched the first video, you'll have a pretty good idea what I'm going to say here, but I'll run through it again. We're looking at the damage dice, the weapon traits, the critical specialization for the type of weapon it is, the number of hands required, which not really an issue with the finesse category here, but it can come up. And then the category itself, simple, martial, or advanced weapons. And much like the last time we talked, I'm going to focus on weapons that are common to make sure that they can be used in any game. There are some great uncommon weapons, and I'll probably do a video on that later. But they're going to be common, and they need to be a level 0 requirement weapon. There are common weapons that have higher requirements than that, but we want ones you can take from the beginning of the game with your level 1 characters. We're going to focus on that. My list here will be in no particular order. These are just great finesse weapons. And we're going to kick off, though, with a pretty standard one I think people look at, the Rapier. This is a very powerful one-handed martial D6 damage die finesse weapon. So you'll notice with finesse weapons, our damage die are often lower than they would have been if it was a strength alternative. So this is really the strong, like, single-handed die we're looking for is a D6. However, this has the deadly D8 trait. So if we critically hit, then we get to add a D8 after we do all of our critical calculations. So we get a little extra bonus on those critical hits, making it a nice high damage weapon. This also has the disarm trait. This means that you can disarm a creature without a free hand by using this weapon, and your bonuses from potency runes do count into your bonus to try to disarm, which is really cool. This is actually really helpful for characters who don't have as high a strength. Finally, the critical specialization for swords is making a creature off guard until the start of your next turn, which is great for helping your allies out. This is just a great damage weapon, right? If that's really what you're going for, I want a high damage, one-handed weapon, that's finesse. This is kind of your go-to. Doesn't have agile, so this is kind of going for those big hits, but that deadly D8 kind of leans into that. All right, the second on our list is the Dancer's Spear. This is versatile and strong. It's a two-handed martial weapon, spear that does D6 damage die as well. Now, two-handed for D6 seems pretty low, but don't worry, it makes sense here. This is really as good as we're going to get for most weapons, honestly, overall in finesse. Two-handed is definitely not as common, though. Why is this still good? It has the reach trait. There are only 2 finesse melee weapons that meet our requirements with this trait, and the other is the whip. This is a great weapon for a character that wants to be able to get almost in melee, but not all the way up, so you can get in, hit, get out, without triggering any sort of reactive strike. Also, this has backswing, sweep, and versatile B. What does that mean? So backswing and sweep are great. They give you bonuses on subsequent strikes, whether you've missed and now you're hitting again, or you're hitting somebody next to the one you already hit. So it's almost like having agile. You get that -4 instead of -5 in those two cases. The versatile B, because you can swing with the other side of it, is just to give you bludgeoning, which can come up against certain creatures. They do have weakness to it. Finally, the crit specialization for Spears is to make the creature clumsy 1 until the start of your next turn, which again is really great for helping your teammates out, especially if you've got friends who can force things like reflex saves, but it's also powerful because it can stack with off guard. The Starknife. It's an efficient one-handed martial weapon. It's a knife with a d4 damage die, so low damage die, but it's got some really interesting traits. And a lot of our knives kind of live in this category. This has the deadly d6 trait, so you get to add a d6 on when you crit, helps up that damage just a little bit. Has the thrown 20 feet trait. While there are several thrown finesse weapons, only this and the throwing knife itself manage 20 feet, and the Starknife has stronger traits, so it makes that an obvious choice on my list. This also has agile and the versatile S for slashing traits, so you can use this as a second weapon if you're dual wielding. It can be really effective for throwing purposes. It just does a lot of things. It fits a lot of roles for you. Maybe it's not going to be your primary one-handed weapon, although it could do that too. Then you've got the critical specialization of knives. This is adding 1d6 bleed damage, which is great for slow ranged damage dealing. So if you really are throwing it, you can get that crit to happen. You're in a good place. You also add the bonus from potency runes to the weapon for the bleed damage, which is fantastic. I love this for dex-based thrown characters. Yes, all weapons with thrown use dex, so you can do higher base damage with non-finesse thrown weapons, but this gives you a way to be able to not only throw it, but then use it in melee combat as well when dex is really what you're leaning into. All right, I mentioned this earlier, and I was iffy on putting this on my list, but it has a few things that I really like here. The whip. This is more interesting than it is powerful, but let's talk about it. So it's a one-handed martial weapon. It's in the flail group, has a d4 damage die, so low base damage, but we'll get to why, at least you should think about it. It has the reach trait, like we mentioned. So there's the other reach trait. It fits a certain fantasy, right? There's certain characters that just want to use a whip, and it really fits their design. It's the only one-handed finesse reach weapon. That's it. At least that fits my criteria. It has the trip, disarm, and non-lethal traits. One of those we really haven't talked about. So there's 2 athletics traits here, and trip being especially good. This can benefit from your potency runes, just like disarm can. As for non-lethal doesn't come up that often. But if you want to use it for non-lethal attacks, yes, you take a hit to your attack chance, but if really what you want to do is knock somebody out and not actually kill them, this can be a great way to do that. The crit specialization for flails is you knock creatures down. They have a reflex save, but you knock them down. Great. Knocking creatures prone is really strong. So this can be a great thing to do, especially when you're at range, and your allies will love it if you pull it off. Is this a go-to for all finesse character builds? No, not at all. But for the right build, this can be perfect as it offers options that other weapons just don't. So don't write it off. Okay, so there are no advanced finesse weapons that are common in rarity. I decided, because my list was fairly small here, because the number of weapons that fit my criteria isn't huge, I am going to break my rules a little bit. I'm going to have an advanced weapon on here that's uncommon. I'm even going to have a couple of martial weapons that are uncommon, but I don't feel like break anything, so should be allowed. But just note, big caveat moment here, and I may talk about some of these in my larger uncommon weapon video. So first is the Dueling Sword. This is a strong weapon. So this one is uncommon for a reason, but again, there aren't any common advanced weapons, so I want to throw one advanced here. This is a sword. It's got a d8 die, which is a little too much for a finesse weapon. It has the versatile P piercing trait. Finally, the crit specialization, of course, is off guard for swords, but it really doesn't have any other traits, and that's why I think it's maybe okay. Its traits aren't going to blow anybody's mind here. It's very straightforward, and if you're going to crit a lot, you know, whether you're better with this or better off with the Rapier is of question, but it is an interesting finesse weapon. All right. I admit these next 2 I did because they're just very fun in my mind. These do not fit my criteria because they are uncommon, but the Nunchaku, because people just want to use this weapon. It's just fun. It's a blunt, one-handed martial weapon with a D6 damage die, and it is a club. So a lot of that's pretty standard. We're okay for now. Has the backswing and disarm traits, so nothing crazy on the traits either, which is why I think it's okay as far as these types of weapons go. With backswing, it's not quite as good as agile, right? Again, we talked about it. If you miss, then you get the -4 instead of -5 or second attack, but agile's always there, so it's a little less than agile, and disarm isn't the strongest of the athletics-based abilities, or sorry, athletics-based skills you can use, so the traits aren't blowing anybody's mind. And the crit specialization of clubs is that you can knock the creature 10 feet directly away from yourself when you crit. I don't love this on strength-based characters, because usually you don't want to have to push them away and then follow them up. But on a finesse weapon for a dex-based character, you might want to be getting out of there. This might be the weapon you hand to your Gish wizard or something, and you actually want that distance between you. So it's very interesting, and blunt weapons don't come up a ton in the finesse group. I really don't think this is overpowered for an uncommon weapon, so I don't see why this couldn't be something available to you at your table. Talk to your GM. And the other one that's just fun, so I felt I needed to add it, was the rope dart. It's a two-handed martial knife with a D4, so you're not going crazy with damage here. It's even using two hands. Is this strong? No. But it has the thrown 20 feet and tethered traits. So when you're throwing it, it comes right on back. You pull it right on back to yourself, which makes it a great thrown weapon, and again, hits a certain fantasy. Now, this also has trip, disarm, and sweep, which is a lot of traits, but remember, we have a D4 and it's using two hands, so again, I don't think this is too strong. We talked about all of these traits, why they're all useful. They have great value here, especially trip. A nice ranged option for trip and disarm can be strong, and being able to pull it back on a miss is really valuable. You don't have to waste a rune on that. Finally, the crit specialization, again, knives causing bleed, adding damage from potency runes. Nice and strong for ranged damage. It's a very cool choice for a rogue or fighter specializing in dex, but you want options other than, any sort of strength flavoring. So this is just a fun weapon, and I know I broke my rules, but I really wanted to get a lot of variety in this video. And there we go, 7 of my favorite finesse weapons, some of which are quite strong for those dex characters out there. What do you think of this list? What is your favorite finesse weapon? Did I even cover it? Maybe you've got something that you really love about one of the other finesse weapons out there. Add your thoughts in the comments. I'm going to work on my ranged weapon list, and as always, adventure on.